Hey everyone, it's Jason. Welcome to Marvel Legendary Base Set Part 2 video. The first part of the video, if you check that out, we went through the heroes. I explained a very brief, randomized version of how the game is played. Again, I wasn't going to go through every single part of it. There are how-to videos, or I will potentially make one myself later. I'm just explaining some of the effects going along so you have an idea when you're looking at these cards, what they do. So we went through all the heroes, and now we are going to start going through the villains, but we got a couple more generic heroes to go through. If you watched the first video, I mentioned how there were generic shield characters. So your hand starts off with the shield trooper, listed as a hero, who gives you 1 attack, and he has 0 cost, because he's a starter card. And then they have the shield agent, up a little bit, who has 1 recruit point. So you start off with a couple of each of these, so you can either buy cards or attack right away. You can purchase for 3 the shield officer Maria Hill, who gives you 2 stars. So this is a card that's always on the side of the deck or field, ready to buy whenever, just so if you want to, like, hey, I could get rid of some of these eventually and I could have some more powerful ones. Or I can't afford anything, I'll buy some of these. I can't afford the heroes, so I'll buy just a Maria Hill. Or if you're playing a Nick Fury deck and you want them shield agents, you might buy a ton of those. Alright, other cards that came up were bystanders. So in the first set, they're just generic bystander cards. They're like people that need to get rescued. So when you're playing them out of they're actually mixed into the villain deck. And when you draw one, it goes underneath that villain. And it's saying, hey, that villain's captured this guy. You defeat that villain, you gain this bystander. So this is where the game can become a little competitive. Because with all the villains and the bystanders, they have a little symbol here with a number, which is a victory point. Ideally, you're supposed to play co-op, try and beat the mastermind, you win the game. But then at the end, everyone can tally up how many points they have if they want to see, hey, who won the most? So, like, did one guy just hammer on regular villains? Did one guy just hammer on this? Or, like, you can make it competitive. Whenever I play with my friends and family, we'll add the stuff up at the end just to kind of be like, oh, who's the overall winner? But we don't consider it a victory unless we beat the mastermind. So if everyone's not working on that, it's just not going to happen. Alright, so this is a wound card. This was mentioned in the previous video. Again, it has no cost, no nothing. It just goes in your deck. It doesn't do anything except prevent you from playing a card each turn. You do have the option of doing healing. It says if you don't recruit any heroes or defeat any villains on your turn, you may KO all wounds in your hand. So basically, if you skip your turn and don't play any of your cards, or you could play as many of your cards, you just don't buy anything, or you decide, hey, I don't have enough points after playing my cards to buy anything, or I don't have enough attack points. But you could play them all first, because maybe you might get draw point, a card that lets you draw things you can find out. You could always just skip your turn then, and discard all wounds. Usually it's better if you have 2 or 3 in your hand. That way you get them out of your deck, and you don't have to worry about them. But you can really use them at any point. So we have a couple other cards that aren't technically villains, but they're in the villain deck. We have the Master Strike and the Steam Twist. So every mastermind, your Doctor Doom, let's say, Magneto, whoever it is, has a special ability that whenever you draw this card from the deck, it automatically triggers that ability. So it's basically them saying, hey, I'm tired of the regular street-level villains doing stuff. I'm going to step in and take over. And it performs a pretty devastating effect. And then they have Steam Twist, because outside of fighting the mastermind and all the villains, there's also the scheme that the villain is trying to do. The scheme is going to look like this. You set that up at the beginning of the game. It adds extra different effects for the game. Either adds maybe more cards, specific cards you have to use, and every time you draw one of these, it triggers something on that scheme. So not only do you have to keep the villains from escaping, and beat the Mastermind, you also have to stop the Steam. If you beat the Mastermind, the Steam is done. But the Steam puts a time limit on the game, because it gives you so many Steams in the deck depending on the Steam. Steam twists, and then if you draw the last one, the Steam succeeds and the villain has completed their plan, and then they win. So we're going to start with our first Mastermind. We have the Red Skull. So the Masterminds are always going to have their number here, it shows what they're worth. And it's going to have a cost on here. Every version, there are several different cards behind here, and they're always going to have the exact same amount. So the villains are always, Red Skull is always going to take 7 points to defeat. They also have an always lead ability. So when you play Red Skull, you always have to include the Hydra villains, no matter what, because that's the people he leads, that's his team. Also, it affects maybe some of his abilities. They might let him draw extra cards. Put down some of that pile. And then his Master Strike ability, which we mentioned before, so you draw that Master Strike card. Each player KOs a hero from their hand. KOing means, discarding means you just take it from hand and you put it in your discard pile. You'll eventually, your deck runs out, you reshuffle your discard and make a new deck. KO means you actually eliminate it from the game. You can no longer use that card. What's nice is you get to choose, so you could actually use this to get rid of one of them generic shield characters from your opening hand, but it depends on when this hits. You may not have any of them. You may have to get rid of like a super awesome Thor card. Alright, so then each Mastermind is going to have its tactics. So all the tactics cards are always going to look the same, even in the later expansions. And the idea is just, because that way if like you flip over, you can't immediately tell which one's which. Because these are placed face down in a random order. So every time you fight the Mastermind, you draw one of these cards. And then you do this ability, and if you beat them, then you get this card in your victory pile. So this is Hydra Conspiracy. So that's just a little fight keywords meaning. This is like, you decide I have 7 attack power, I'm going to fight him, which basically fight means you're defeating them. You have to have more than 7 points to attack them. We don't have to. You can attack them with less, but there's really no point to attack someone with less unless you for some reason have a card that will eventually. There are some sets later on, expansions, that let you add points after you've already attacked. But typically you always want to have at least 7 points. So when you do fight him, basically you defeated this tactic the Red Skull is trying. You get to draw 2 cards. Then you draw another card for each Hydra villain in your victory pile. And that's why I need the Hydra villains. So this one is Mega Blast Grenades. You fight this one, you get +3 attack. So if you have attack for 7, you beat him, you get 3 more attack. You could be super useful because you could have another character or more attack points. You can either fight him again or fight another one. Or they might be wasted if there's no one that has 3 points or you don't have enough. And that's why they're random, because they could be super beneficial to you. They might be useful. This one is Ruthless Dictator and Endless Resources. So then we go to the villain groups. So these guys are just mixed into a villain deck, and then every turn you draw a villain, they enter the city. And then as each one draws, it moves each villain down a space, and when the last one gets to the 5th spot, it leaves the city, and then you take some bad stuff happens to you. You don't want that to happen. So like the Mastermind, their attack power here shows how much. So Hydra Supreme here has Supreme Hydra is worth +3 victory points for each other Hydra villain in your victory pile. So if you're trying to play competitively throughout the game, obviously if you kill him, you're going to want to make sure you're taking out every Hydra person you can get. If you don't really care, then you don't have to worry about it. We also have Viper. So she has the fight ability. So again, when you fight her, each player without another Hydra villain in their victory pile gains a wound. So if you haven't beat any other Hydra people before, you may want to wait, or if you don't care if you get a wound, go ahead and fight her anytime. She also has an escape effect, which means if she gets past the end of the city, this also applies. In addition to the other bad stuff that happens when the villains escape. I'm putting those on the wrong pile. So this is the Endless Armies of Hydra. Now I'm only showing one of each of these. There are some of these cards that are multiples of each type. There's usually like 2 of each character. Some of them are different on the other expansions, but generally there's 2 of each of the villains. Fight, play the top 2 cards of the villain deck. So this is actually a pretty terrible fight effect. Some of them, you notice, have always been kind of a bonus or not terrible. This, as soon as you fight these guys, you immediately have to play 2 more cards, which they could be 2 more Hydra. Ooh, that's not bad. But they also could be, you know, a Juggernaut and a Dr. Octopus. So it's kind of the downside of that. And then we have Hydra Kidnappers. Who you fight him, you gain a shield officer, basically saying you're rescuing someone from shield. So that one's actually a benefit. So it's like you might want to kill him as soon as you can, so you can get that. Alright, our next mastermind is Magneto. Always leads the Brotherhood. And in this one, as each player reveals a X-Men hero or discards down to 4 cards. So I mean, that can really limit your hand each turn. How many cards you have, especially if you had something that built up other cards. Now, if you play with X-Men, you're playing all X-Men deck against them, this is basically useless, because you're going to always have an X-Men card. But if you're playing against Avengers against them, only Avenger characters, you're always going to take a hit. If you have a mixture of both, then it could be 50-50, depending on what cards you purchased by the time his effect goes off. So there's kind of, you know, that difference between what difficulty you want to make the game for yourself. And he's got Xavier's Nemesis. She's got another thing for each of your X-Men heroes, rescue a bystander. So again, if you're not playing with X-Men, this card doesn't do anything. And you can see some X-Men villains, there's lots of stuff there. Recruit a free X-Men. So that'd be awesome if you're playing with a bunch of X-Men. Playing with no X-Men, this doesn't do anything for you. But it's a bitter captor. And the electromagnetic bubble. And crushing shockwave. He leads the Brotherhood, who consists of the Juggernaut, who takes 6 to beat, who has an ambush effect. So this is a new one. Ambush is when you play the villain from the deck at the beginning of the turn, you automatically do this effect. Each player KOs 2 heroes from their discard pile. It's nice because at least it's their discard pile, so you could have already had some bad cards in there, but you may have had good cards. You could even get extremely lucky and have no cards in your discard pile. But yeah, still potentially losing 2 cards forever really sucks because you lose some of your great cards. He has the escape effect. Each player takes 2 heroes from their hand. So that's a lot harder to take because you're always going to have a hand. So now here we have the Blob. It says you can't defeat Blob unless you have an X-Men hero. And again, this is one of them difficulty things. If you do not put any X-Men in your deck, you can never defeat him. So he's just going to end up escaping at some point. You're probably going to take damage. But if you always have one, then he's not an issue. So we have Mystique, transforming into Iron Man, or out of Iron Man maybe, whose escape you become a Steam Twist that it takes effect immediately. So basically if she leaves, she automatically becomes an extra Steam Twist. Most Steams have like 5 to 8 Steam Twists in the deck. This automatically adds an extra one, so you could, and there's at least 2 of her in the deck, so you could have up to 2 times you could get hit earlier than you should have. And then we have Sabretooth. So our next mastermind is Loki. So now we've had Red Skull for Captain America and the Avengers. We've had Brotherhood or Magneto in the Brotherhood for the X-Men. And then we have Loki, who leads the enemies of Asgard. In this instance, each player reveals a strength hero or gains a wound. So again, if you're playing with some of them characters that have no strength cards, you could potentially always take it. If you have a characters with a lot of strength cards, then this wouldn't be an issue. Vanishing Illusions. Cruel Ruler. Defeat a villain in the city for free. That's pretty sweet. Whispers and Lies. Each other player KOs 2 bystanders from their victor pile. So it's not super terrible, because depending on how early you get this, you may not have any bystanders. Maniacal Tyrant. Now this thing's actually really bad. Play up to 4 cards from your discard piles. What's nice is because these are random, and you have to defeat the villain 1 time for each one of these cards. And you could adjust the difficulty by reducing some of the cards, but if this is the very last one you beat, well, that fact doesn't mean anything. If it's the very first one you beat, that could really screw up the beginning of your game if you have like a bunch of your generic buying cards in your discard pile. So Loki does the enemies of Asgard, which are Frost Giants. Ymir, the Frost King, the Frost Giant King. Enchantress, lets you draw 3 cards, that's pretty nice. And the Destroyer, which fight, KO all shield heroes. That is pretty terrible. And if he escapes, each player KOs 2 of their heroes. So you kind of gotta sometimes plan when you're doing this, and what's nice though is because this just affects your player. So if I attack him, only I lose my shield heroes, not everybody. Where this is every player. So you kind of time it around that. Like, hey, can I afford to lose my shield heroes? Maybe I don't have any shield heroes. Alright, so now we have Dr. Doom, who leads the Doombot Legions. So this one's a little bit different. And we'll get to that one in a moment. Master Strike. Each player with exactly 6 cards in their hand reveals a tech hero, or puts 2 cards from their hand on the top of their deck. So it limits your hand, but it's not like you're discarding or KOing stuff, so it may not be super terrible. Monarch's Decree. So I have a Fantastic Four villain, even though we don't have the Fantastic Four yet. Dark Technology. Seekers of Time Travel. Treasures of Electvaria. This one's a neat effect too. When you draw a new card of hands at the end of your turn, you draw 3 extra cards. So that means your next turn you're going to be even potentially more powerful. So now, all the other characters, Mastermind so far, have had an entire group of characters, 4 or 5, like 4 different characters. Doom just leads what are called henchmen, not villain. They're henchmen villain, as opposed to, let me grab one of the other guys. These are villains, and then what group they belong to. Henchmen villains are usually weaker, but there's also like 10 or 12 in the deck. They're your minion, generic, toss-away, expendable characters. So he'll always, every time you play, you always put in, I think, depending on the difficulty and how many players, you put in so many villains, and you always put in so many henchmen. Doom says he always has to have the henchmen. So you get to pick all your different villains. So you get a little bit more flexibility that way. So what these guys do is fight, look at the top 2 cards of your deck, KO one of them, and put 1 back. So there's a ton of these guys. Every time you beat one, they KO a thing in your deck. And you have to occasionally beat guys. So now, there are also, that went through the 4 different masterminds. There are also other villain groups in here, in most of the sets, that don't actually correspond to a mastermind. And they go in because they add additional flexibility. So you can have Magneto with the Brotherhood and Hydra, or with the Brotherhood and or you have like the Brotherhood and the Skrulls. You get some different flexibility every time you play. So this is the Skrulls, and it's Skrull Queen Ventract. If you're familiar with the Civil War storyline, that's her. And then she's got kind of a neat ability here, Ambush. Put the highest cost hero from the HQ, characters you buy, under this villain. This villain its attack is equal to that hero's cost. So if you play like a Spider-Man who costs 2, she would have a power of 2. Basically saying, hey, she changed you into Spider-Man. But if you played a Hulk who has a cost of 8 under her, she has a cost of 8, which makes her a lot harder. Upside is when you defeat her, you gain that card. It's also a way so like someone's like, hey, I really need that, Hulk card. Let me beat her. Or someone's like, no, we just have to get rid of her. I'm going to take her. I'll take the card. Alright, so you have Pybok, the Power Scroll, the Super Scroll, and Scroll Shapeshifter. This is kind of more of a generic one. But she does the exact same thing as the other one, but this one just says put the rightmost hero instead of the highest one. So this one you don't get an option on which one, but he could potentially be anything. Where the Queen was always the highest. Alright, so we have the Masters of Evil. So we have Melker, which obviously is more than 4 Masters of Evil. So I think they just use this as a way to get some of the more odd characters in there. Because they also have a Whirlwind. But then you get Ultron, which, why isn't he a Mastermind? He probably will be in a later set, but at this present time, they just wanted to make him a regular guy. And then we have Baron Zemo. Alright, and then we have what are the Radiation Heroes. So these are basically Hulk villains. So you have Maestro, or Future Hulk. Zyzax, the Abomination. So if you fight the Abomination on the streets or the bridge, rescue 3 bystanders. So this might be a guy you might be like, oh, I can defeat him on the first turn, but maybe you want to wait and let him go a couple of rounds and then beat him. But that's always risky too, because you might end up not being able to beat him when he's on those. And then of course the Leader. And then we have the Spider Foes, the Green Goblin, the Lizard, which like each one of these guys are kind of neat because they gain an effect per location. So what he gains a bystander, but the Lizard gains extra effect if he's in the sewer. Draw 8 cards instead of 6 if you defeat Dr. Octopus. And then there's Venom, who cannot be defeated unless you have a covert hero. Which is a little bit easier than like the Blob, who just needed a X-Men hero. And then the henchmen we have for this set, we've already seen the Legion of Doombots. So we have the Hand Ninjas, which are kind of nice. You get 1 recruit every time you beat them. Savage Land Mutates, who gets you an extra card. And the Sentinels, who are actually a little bit worse, because they make you KO one of your heroes. But the upside to this is you can get rid of them later on in the game. You could get rid of your like cheap starting hand shield cards. So you're not drawing cards that only produce 1 attack or 1 recruit, and you're drawing more of your Hulks and Captain Americas. So then the final part of this video and the last things are the schemes. So this one is Midtown Bank Robbery. Basically all this works is you have a setup, how many twist cards you put in the deck, and you also add 12 bystanders to the villain deck. Has a special rule, each villain gets +1 for each bystander it has. So like with the Green Goblin, who immediately comes in and captures one, he automatically has a +1 attack. When you draw in them twist cards, any villains in the bank captures 2 bystanders, so he gets more powerful, and then play the top card of the villain deck. So that's actually pretty crappy. And then evil wins when 8 bystanders are carried away by escaping villains. So you just gotta keep stopping guys, or beat the mastermind. So some Superhero Civil War. Again, these always have all the same picture. Legacy Virus. Some of them have special rules, some don't. Replace Earth's leader with Killbots. So in this one is like unleash the power of the Cosmic Cube. You have 8 twists that get shuffled in. The first one you put that twist next to this scheme. For twists 5 through 6, each player gains a wound. So every time you draw a twist on 5 or 6, each player gains a wound. On twist 7, each player gains 3 wounds, and if they get the 8th one, they win. Secret Invasion of the Skull Shapeshifters. Has some neat abilities. Portal to Dark Dimension. and negative zone prison breakout. So this one doesn't have a special effect, but you add an extra henchman group to the villain deck. Every time they draw a twist, you play the top 2 cards of the villain deck, and they win if 12 villains escape. But every time a villain's played, they get pushed out. And there's only 5 spots, so when you draw one, you're automatically pushing every card 2 spaces. So if you got 2 of these back to back, you could have the city filled up in 2 turns. Alright, so that's what we have for a legendary base set. Check back later and we'll have some of the expansions. See ya!